This video demonstration is going to be about creating a photo montage in Photoshop. And it's incredibly difficult, so please be patient with yourself because I'm showing you how it works best with the 3 photographs that I've selected, but the ways that I edit may need to be tweaked for yours, and it kind of just depends with each person. It varies. So the first thing that you are going to want to do is you are going to want to go up to File and New, and we're going to create a new document. So let's go ahead and set this up. You're going to want to title this your last name, your first name, and then whatever photo montage this is, okay? We are going to want to set this up to be either horizontal or vertical. If you want the orientation to be vertical, you're going to want to make your height 11 and your width 8.5. Okay. If you want your orientation to be horizontal, those numbers actually need to be flipped. So your width needs to be 11 inches and your height 8.5. Let's set your resolution to 300 and make sure that your background contents are white, okay? And let's go ahead and click Create. Okay. Zoom out just a little bit here. Alrighty. So now what we want to do is we want to go find the 3 photographs that we want to combine into our photo montage. And we have these set up to be a background image, which is going to be the image that is the furthest away from you, a middle ground image, which is going to be kind of in the middle, and then the foreground image, which is actually going to be the image that is the closest to you visually. So we're going to try to combine all 3 of these to make them look like they actually exist together. So what you are going to need to do is drag in your first image, and this is going to be your background image. So just click on that image and drag and drop it onto your blank document. Bounding boxes are going to pop up, and you're going to need to resize this. So hold down the Shift key and drag the corners, and let's go ahead and make this fit the entire document. Move it around however you need to. Okay. And then go ahead and click Enter on your keyboard to place that. Okay. So what this is actually going to do is it's going to want you to rasterize this layer so you can work with it. So right click and then rasterize the layer, and that will actually turn it into a photo that you can edit. So let's go back, and now let's grab your middle ground photograph. So that's going to be in the middle visually. Drag and drop that onto your blank document. Resize that by holding down the Shift key and just kind of stretch that thing out. Click Enter once you feel like it's in a good positioning. Okay, and again, come over here and right click to rasterize that layer to make it workable and editable for you in Photoshop. And the last image, your foreground image, and this is the image that is going to be the closest to you visually. Go ahead and drop that onto your blank document. Resize that so that it fits the entire frame. Click Enter to place that, and then we are going to right click to rasterize that. Okay, so now we have our layers stacked, our background, our middle ground, and our foreground. Okay, our background is the farthest away from us, and then we've got our middle ground, and then we've got our foreground, which is the closest to us. So what we want to start off by doing is lowering the opacity on our foreground and our middle ground so that we can kind of see where they're positioned with each other in relationship to our background. So I'm going to lower the opacity to about 50% here, and then I'm going to lower the opacity to about 50% here. Okay, just enough so that I can see through. Alrighty. So I can see I've got my little girl here. I have the logs kind of located here. I've got that doorway that's located back here. So I think that the location of all these are really nice. If you need to move photos for whatever reason, you can click on your Move tool, And then depending on what layer on, you can move those around accordingly. So if I needed to move my little girl, for instance, to the left or to the right, then I could do that at this point and just kind of change the positioning of them. What you also need to think about too is really, what do you want to get rid of in this image? Like, what do you want to keep and combine? What aspects of the photographs do you need in order to make your photo montage? And what aspects do you not need? So I'm going to raise up the opacity because I know that I don't need all of this fencing right here, because I want to include this sort of open doorway back here, and I want to include these logs right here, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull up the opacity on my middle ground again and the opacity on my foreground again. And we're going to get rid of all of this grass space and this fence space. So the easiest way to go about doing this is actually by using selection tools. So there are a couple of different types. The lasso tool will enable you to do a freeform selection around your subject that you're trying to isolate. So I want just her, so I'm gonna go around her, and you have to have a really steady hand for this, which I unfortunately do not have. But if you go nice and slow, some people like the lasso tool. And now I've made a selection around her. Anytime you use selection tools in Photoshop, you have to go up here to select and mask. And there are two things that you're going to want to adjust when you are in the select and mask. You're going to want to pull the radius up, and I typically pull it all the way up to 8, maybe 80 pixels, because what it does is those edges that I did a really bad job of selecting, it actually pulls those outside edges and kind of makes the selection that I did a little more smooth. And then pull up the feather just to like 2 pixels, and that just kind of softens those edges a little bit for you. 1 to 2 pixels is fine. Click OK. And I have her selected, but I actually want to get rid of the opposite of her, which is all of this grass. So I'm going to go up to select and inverse. I've now selected all of this grass area right here, and I'm going to press the delete button, and that got rid of all of that for me. Okay. Let me show you just a couple more selection tools too that you can use to get rid of any objects in your photos that you don't need. Another tool that you can use is the polygonal lasso. So if you have like a shape that you want to get rid of that is not a perfect geometric shape but can be used by making straight lines, the polygonal lasso is really good. Magnetic lasso attaches to individual pixels. I don't really like it because it is very choppy. If you work really slow, it's easy to use, but you have to single click a lot in order to get that to work really nicely, okay? So there is that. You can use any of these freeform shape tools, but you probably won't want to work with these for this project because you're going to be wanting to get rid of irregular shapes. The quick selection tool is my favorite selection tool to use. If you use the plus pixel, it will grab the pixels for you. So I'm going to click all over her. And what it's doing is it's just grabbing the pixels that are within my circle. So it actually ended up grabbing some of this grass too. So I need to go and get the negative pixel now. I'm going to resize and get rid of this green grass down here. Use your brackets on your keyboard to resize your quick selection tool. There we go. Resize to get in here, and that selection actually looks pretty good. I need to grab some of her sweatshirt, so let's go back and get the plus and grab some of that sweatshirt, get rid of that tiny little dot there. Okay, so go to select and mask. Again, you're going to want to pull the radius up anytime you do a selection, somewhere between 80 and 100, I would say, and then the feather from 1 to 2 pixels just to soften those edges. Okay. I want to get rid of everything around her, so I'm going to go to select and inverse, and let's go ahead, and now that everything but my little girl is selected, I'm going to click delete. And that got rid of that. All right. So pretty cool stuff. Now what I need to do, since I've kind of dealt with her, and I'll come back and revisit her and adjust her in a little bit, I'm going to turn off my foreground layer and I'm going to address my middle ground layer now. Okay. So if I turn my eyeball off and on, I really don't feel like I need all of this junk on the right-hand side because I just need this log right here and I need this doorway. And I really kind of want to keep these beautiful leaves right here, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a mask to my middle ground photograph. So I'm going to go down here and click on Add Layer Mask. I'm going to use the gradient tool over here on the left-hand side just to create a very subtle mask to deactivate the right-hand side of this image. So I'm going to click and swipe. And what that did was that deactivated all of that stuff over there with the shed that I really didn't need. So this actually looks really nice. I have this grass for my background that's exposed now because I deactivated, using that gradient tool, my photograph on the right-hand side. Okay? So I think that that actually looks pretty good, and I'm going to leave that, and I'm going to turn back on my little girl. So now I think that all of these are starting to look like they're kind of interplaying with each other really nicely. One way that you can get your images to sort of blend together a little bit more seamlessly is by actually using the blending modes. So I'm going to click on my foreground, and you can start to experiment with blending modes at this point, and seeing how applying a blending mode to your foreground or your middle ground, you won't need to apply anything to your background, affects the overall image and how all of these kind of work together. So for my foreground, I'm going to click the blending modes, and I'm going to start to just click through these. So this is darken, so it doesn't look very natural, which I'm not a fan of. Multiply, color burn, linear burn, darker color, lighten. And lighten actually looks pretty nice. I think that's probably what I'm going to end up going with. So let's go ahead and go with lighten for this. And the blending mode that you choose is going to totally change because blending modes are different when combined with different photographs. The effect is totally different with each image that you use that changes. So try them all out and see which one that you like the best. So I think this lighten looks cool because it kind of looks like she's now pushing through those leaves. Her eye is a little bit lost, so I'm going to get my move tool and just move her. Let's go to my foreground layer, move her over just a little bit. Or maybe go to Command T and resize her and make her just a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay? So she's now pushing through those leaves. And I think that this all looks really nice. I think one thing that I need to start working on at this point, and what you're going to want to start working on once these all kind of start to blend together a little bit nicely, is you're going to want to apply individual adjustments to each of these photographs to make the colors and the lighting and the contrast match up, because she's really muted and she needs to be sort of intensified and saturated. So with her selected in my foreground, I'm going to go to the adjustments drop down and select clip to layer. So now when I do any adjustment right here, it's only going to attach to her, okay? So I'm going to click on the vibrance, and I'm going to pull up the vibrance quite a bit because I've got that really green leaf right there. I'm going to go to curves, and I'm going to just intensify the shadows and the highlights in her a little bit. Okay, that's looking good. I'm going to go to selective color, and I'm going to select the reds, and I'm going to pull down the magentas because her face got a little bit red. Okay. I also need to kind of fix the radius, pulled out some of the grass around her shirt a little bit. So if I turn off my middle ground and my background, Actually, it's not going to let me do it because I have the blending mode applied to it. What I can do is I can select my foreground and go ahead and get an eraser tool, and I can just erase those little wispies that are around her sweatshirt because it looks like her sweatshirt's kind of glowing from that. There we go. Okay, very good. I now want to adjust my middle ground, so I'm going to move down to middle ground. And my shed back here got pretty blue, so I'm going to select the selective colors layer adjustment, get the cyans, and I'm going to pull down the cyans and make that door nice and white. Okay. Another thing that I'm noticing as I'm kind of looking around, and you're going to want to do layer adjustments to correct the color and the lighting and the contrast, but I'm also seeing that it looks like she's blended in with this log right here. So I'm actually going to go to my layer mask and I'm going to fully deactivate that log so it looks like she's standing in front of it. There we go. That's much, much, much better. There we go. Good. Okay. So now all of that log is deactivated and it looks like she's actually standing in front of it, which is a little more believable. Once you apply individual adjustments to all of your photographs as their own, you can turn off clip to layer. Okay. Go all the way to the top of your layers panel, and now you can start to apply adjustments to this entire thing. So let's go ahead and make this black and white. And let's adjust the contrast just a little bit here. Okay. And now you'll see that these adjustments are applying to the entire photograph. Okay. If there's a downward arrow right there, that means that this adjustment is only attaching to the photograph that's directly below it. If there's no down arrow, that means that it's applying to the entire document. So once you are done kind of doing these individual adjustments and doing adjustments overall, go back to each of your individual photos and just make sure that you have cleaned up any areas, like when I went back to the foreground and I erased those edges around the sweatshirt and things like that. All of those little details, once you finish this, are crucial and can make the photo montage look believable or not look believable.